Today I'm going to show you how to make a very easy stocking. This is a class that I have taught for the last 10 years. Everybody always loved the class, so I thought I would share it with you here today. But first we're going to go to the thrift store because I'm going to see what I can find. I have something in mind for a stocking that I want to make for in my living room. Here's something that looks interesting. These are nice fabrics, good quality in that, and I think that will even work with the bell pull that I have in that room. Okay, and I just spotted this one. These might be better colors. And then I saw this. That would be pretty for the interior. So let's keep looking. That would be pretty. Oh my goodness, while I was digging, look what I found. This beautiful needlepoint. Doesn't have a price on it. I could do something with that. I love that. That's what you find when you keep digging. Here's another good option. It looks really good with my colors. This is more of the color in my room. And that could really be a very pretty Victorian looking stocking. Okay, look in this basket. This is cute. This would be great for someone that wouldn't even have to cut out their own stocking. Very pretty. Look, and it's already, somebody has already put the nice inner lining on it. It's cute. Only $3 for that. This cute reindeer fabric. It's another piece of really pretty. Look at this. Look at this one's gorgeous. And your traditional Christmas, the plaids are always pretty. I just saw something that would be a beautiful cuff for this, but the whole bolt, it's 8 yards, it's a gorgeous silk, it's $40, so that's a little bit, but that would be a beautiful cuff. Gorgeous. I'm sure that came in together. It's $1.50. I like the texture of this. I'm looking for the cuff. That could be pretty, because then if I did the cream, then I could incorporate some of these colors or even the pinks into the embroidery. This color would be beautiful to embroider the name. Still have this option. We have a lot of nice stuff in here today. So yesterday we took a little trip to the thrift store, and let me show you what I ended up getting. So I did end up with this one. I thought it was the perfect color, and I love the Victorian feel of this. I got this for the cuff, and this is going to be the lining. So what you need is you'll need 3 pieces to make this stocking. You'll need a cuff fabric, a lining, and then your face fabric. This was $1.50. This was $5, but it was on sale for 25% off. And this was $2.50. So you can use any pattern that you like for this stocking. You can go to Joann's or Hobby Lobby and pick up a McCall's or a Simplicity stocking pattern. Whatever stocking that you like, it will work for this particular technique. And I have made this for so many years, so I've made my own pattern. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible for you so you can follow along. So I've decided how I want my stocking to be. I'm going to flatten this down, and then we're going to get our stocking cut out. But first we're going to pin our pattern down. I noticed I pinned the tops, and then I'm pinning the bottom. And then I'll come and pin the sides. And I'm making sure to keep my fabric from puckering as I do that. If it doesn't look good before you sew it, it's not going to look good after you sew it. So just always remember that. Okay. And then we're going to cut it out. So I like to work in smaller sections. Okay, and then just cut it out. So just follow along. This is probably the most time-consuming thing when you're sewing, is the cutting. And this is why I like to work with smaller pieces of fabric, because then you're able to move your fabric. It just makes it easier to cut out your pattern. And I might make that a little longer. So you notice that I've left that at the top. I think I want this to be just a little longer. Okay. And I want that to lay flat while I'm cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and put another pin in there. And carefully, again, I'm going to turn my fabric. Okay. Now I'm going to use this as my pattern to cut out my back, because now I'll be able to make sure that everything lines up from the front and the back, and I'll have a mirror image on both sides. I'm going to give this a good press too, and I'm going to get a spray. I want this to be as flat as possible, so any wrinkles or puckers in this I want to get out before I start working with this. Okay, and that's our front section. So with my right sides together, I have pinned my stocking to the back. I line my pattern up like this. It just works better to give me a nice uniform front and back. So that's why I do it. I'm not going to be quite as anal when I get to the lining, because you're not going to see that. It's going to be inside. Okay, see how I'm using the whole blade? Because you get that dull spot right in here when people, a lot of times people will cut like this, little short And see how I'm ending right there? And that's when you get that dull spot. So if you use your whole blade, it keeps you from ruining your scissors, because you want to use good quality sewing scissors. Makes life a lot easier in the sewing room. Okay, so then we're going to take this, all the pins out. So now when we sew these, your front and your back should line up pretty much perfectly. And you should have the same motif on both sides. Okay, so there's our stocking. Now let's do the lining. Okay, so now we're going to cut the lining. And because this really doesn't have a right side or a wrong side, I just folded it over, so I'm going to cut the front and the back at the same time. And you notice I started down a little bit right here, because remember I made the other one a little bit longer than what my pattern was. So I wanted to make sure that I could do the same with the lining. Okay. All right. So then we're finished cutting that part. Now we got to work on the cuff. Okay, so now we have 2 of our face fabric pieces cut and 2 of our lining pieces cut. And now to do the cuff. Okay, so when you're getting ready to do the cuff on this particular stocking, we're only going to do a cuff on the front. We're not going to do one all the way around the stocking. So you want to, at this point, go ahead and determine which way do you want your toe of your stocking to face. Do you want it to face this way? Or do you want it to face that way? I know I want mine that way. So I'm going to lay my stocking down. I'm going to get my cuff fabric and I'm going to cut out my cuff. Because the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and sew the cuff on. Okay. So I cut my hanger, and this is what that will look like. Okay. And then what I did is I took it to the ironing board and I folded it so the raw edges meet in the middle, and I pressed it down flat, and then I turn it so I have a fold here and then my edges here. And what I'm going to do is just stitch down that one side. And to top stitch, I may just come back over on this too, just because I like to keep things cohesive. So let's go to the machine and do that real quick. Okay, so we're going to stitch this down the side. And because I am working with a heavier weight fabric, this is an upholstery weight, and then I've folded it over on itself. So it's basically, I have like 4 layers of fabric here. What I did was I made a longer stitch length so it will work better in the fabric and I won't get any puckering. So the next thing we're going to do is start embellishing our cuff. And I found in my stash this really cute little doily lace. It's vintage. It's, gosh, I don't know how old this is, but it's really pretty. And I thought it's so delicate looking that it would be perfect. So what I've done, you'll notice that I've pinned it, and I have also used clips to clip that in place because this will tend to slide when I am sewing that on. So that's what we're going to do next. So I have pinned my lace along the bottom of my cuff, and I'm going to get this started under the machine. And obviously on your first stocking, if this would be the first one that you would make, you do not have to do all of this. Again, I'm going to lengthen my stitch because I want to make sure that that stays in place. So I'll take the pins out as I go, and I'm going to hold that down with my stiletto to keep it in place. I don't want it sliding because this stuff will slide. And at this point, you hope you're getting it on straight. I went to extra measures to make sure that I am keeping it straight, and I think, unfortunately, I am still moving a little bit. Okay, I'm going to take that off. I'm close enough to the edge that I can kind of just hold that down with that finger and then feed it through using my stiletto. Okay, and I really don't have to backstitch because that's going to get caught in the seam allowance. So let's see how we did. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. The next thing we're going to do is put the name on the cuff. Now, because I have an embroidery machine here, I'm going to embroidery the name. But if you don't have an embroidery machine, don't worry about that. You can go to a craft store and get letters, fusible letters even, and iron them on. Or you can do the old-fashioned way with the glue and the glitter and put the name on like that. But I'm going to show you on my Baby Lock Solaris is what I'm going to be using today to do the embroidery. And I'm going to show you how I embroidery on my cuff. But first I'm going to sew just a little stitch right along the top because I want to secure this. And then we'll come back and we'll do the embroidery. Okay, so this is the embroidery machine hoop. And what I've done is I've put a piece of stabilizer in there. That just gives me a better embroidery. And then what I'm going to do is lay this in here. Well, first of all, I want to mark where I want my embroidery. So I'm going to, I want the center of my embroidery to be right here. So I am going to make a little dot. So I'm going to make a tiny little dot right there where I want to center my embroidery design. I'm going to lay that in there. Make sure I have it straight. Painter's tape is your friend in the sewing room. I am going to tape that down so it doesn't move on me. We're going to the machine and I'm going to show you how I'm going to set this up. So we are working on the Baby Lock Solaris today. That is what I'm doing my embroidery with. So I'm going to go into embroidery. I'm going to go into the font, and I kind of want this a little fancy, so I think I'm going to use the exclusive script and then put my name in. Come down here and go to my lowercase. Okay, and then I'm going to set that. Now I'll be able to move that around if I need to. This is the thread that I decided to use. It is the perfect color to go with that bluish green. And I think that's going to make a gorgeous design. Now I want to see how that's going to look. And on this particular machine, I am fortunate enough to be able to see exactly how that is going to look on my stocking, because I have something called a scanner feature. I have to remember that I'm going to have a seam allowance up here. And I don't know if you can see that, but I can tell exactly where that's going to be. And if I want to move that up a little bit, so I can move that if I want. And I think I do want to move that down just a little bit, because remember, we're going to have a seam allowance up here. So I think I can bring that down just a little bit more. But isn't that cool? I can tell exactly where that's going to be. So what I'm going to do is just press start and let it start embroidering. And see this thread here? I'm going to cut that. I have this thing about threads. So I'm going to stop it. I'm going to use my scissors and cut that. And then I'm going to start it. And it tells me it's taking 5 minutes for that to embroidery. Okay, so let's start putting this stocking together. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take our face fabrics and we're going to lay those right sides together. Make sure you have them lined up. Okay, and then we're going to measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down, and we're going to put a pin. And then we are going to lay that to the side. Now we're going to do the same thing with the lining. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're going to put a pin. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we're going to sew from the pin to the top on both pieces. Okay, so I've sewn them together, and this is what I have. This and this. So I sewed them, and then I pressed the seams opened. Okay. This is what we have. One thing I did do is I went ahead and sewed my hanger on because it's very thick, and I started walking it and then very carefully and very slowly used the machine to do that, because that is this is a very heavy fabric. You're probably maybe not going to be working with such a heavy fabric. Now what we're going to do is take our fabrics, and we're going to right sides to right sides, and I'm going to line this up. I'm going to line the center up first, and then I'm going to come back and line my sides up. So you're sewing right sides to right sides right now. And I do like to use clips. Not only does it save your fingers from pinning yourself all the time, but I think it gives a better hold. Let's go to the machine. I'm going to try. I'm going to come across. So I want about a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So I'm going to start this. It's going to back tack for me. I'm just going to sew right across the top of the stocking. This is called the flat stocking method. And I'm getting up into that balk. I'm going to use my stiletto. I'm going to raise my foot, use my stiletto to get any fabric sticking up. I'm going to take one, and then I'm going to walk it. So I want to hold that down. That's why I sew with the stiletto, so I can hold things down. Most over it. When you are on bulky fabric, just remember to slow down. And then at the end, I want to do, just to secure that, so I take a couple little back tacks. So this is now what we have. It was sewn right along here, and then you want to lay it out flat. Now what you want to do is bring this over to here and make sure to line up your seams. You want to make sure that they're lined up so you don't end up with a wonky stocking. And I like to use clips. I just think it holds it better. So the first thing is making sure that you're lined up with your seam. And then you're just going to bring the rest of it around and you're going to pin in place. Leave an opening in the lining to turn it. And I like to leave the opening in the flattest place possible. That way it's easier to go in and stitch it. So I'm going to leave my opening right along here. So I'm going to flip. These are called Wonder Clips that I'm using. For those, you can find these at Joann's or any quilt shop will carry those. And remember that we've already sewn here, so we don't have to sew there. So you're going to clip it all the way around or pin it, whatever. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew. Okay, so now what we're going to do is sew all the way around the stocking, leaving that opening. Follow the line of your stocking. You might have to, when you need to turn a little, press your foot up and turn. Take your pins out as you go. Don't sew over pins if you've pinned. Just raise that foot a little. You just show the fabric whose boss. So pick up the foot. It kind of releases the pressure there and lets you maneuver your fabric better. And we're going to stop sewing right here where this clip is, because remember this part is already sewn. I'm going to sew it right here. And then I'm going to do a couple little back stitches, and I'm going to cut my thread. Now I'm going to come around and do the lining. Don't forget not to sew your opening closed and your lining. And if you haven't made one of these before, I would suggest not to do what I did and use a heavier weight for the first one that you make. You don't want to give yourself undue stress, because heavier weight fabric can be more difficult. So wait till you have a little experience sewing. Heavier weight fabric you'll be fine with. And I'm not worried about the fact that I'm using white thread, because you're not going to see my stitches. Just maneuver your fabric as you go around. So we're going to sew about right to there, and then we're going to back stitch. Just give that a strong reinforcement stitch there, and then cut our thread, because this is where we're leaving our opening. I left a bigger opening than you're going to really need to, and the reason I did that is because my fabric is heavy, and that's a lot of bulk to get through. Put back down, start sewing. And then I'm going to do a back stitch. Okay, cut my thread. So now we're sewn, except we have our opening, and that's what we're going to turn. But there's one thing we're going to do before we turn. Okay, so anywhere you have a curve, you want to clip. So in the toe, see where you have these, just give a little clip up to the stitching line. Make sure that you don't go through the line. Just want to clip it up to. And this is just helps to make sure it's gonna lay flat. So anywhere you have a curve, just remember to clip. And sometimes I'll even cut some of the bulk out. Okay. And then you want to do the same for the lining. Anywhere you have a little curve. Stockings have a lot of curves in them. And again, I'm just going to cut a little bit of the bulk out of the corner. Anywhere that I'm worried that it's not going to lay flat. Okay, so now we're ready to turn it. So we're going to stick our hand through the opening, and we're going to go up and grab the toe out like that. I like to lay it flat and smooth it. And we're going to give it a good press. We're going to remember that we have that seam allowance that needs to get stitched shut. You can hand stitch this, and if I were giving this as a gift, that certainly is what I would do, because I wouldn't want to give that as a gift and people see that, but because it's mine, I'm just going to run a little stitch across there with the machine and do that. And then we're going to do the same with this. This tool, it's by R&K. It's called the turning tool, and it helps to get in those seams and press those down. And then I'm going to turn it and I'm going to work on the lining. So then what I'm going to do is give this a good press here at that seam and sew that shut. Before we put this in, we're going to give it a little press. But one thing I do want you to do is make sure that you don't have any threads. Get rid of those threads. Nothing makes something look homemade like long threads sticking from something. Go to the ironing board and give this a little press. I'm going to pull up my seams. Make sure they're flat. I'm going to do the same on the lining. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is push the lining down into your stocking. And we're going to give it a good press again after we do that. Okay, so just get it down in there. I'm going to take my turning tool and take the wider end this time. And flatten that all out. Take my hand, go down in there, make sure it is in there nicely. Okay, so then after I get it in there, I'm going to go around, I'm going to press it down on the inside. Going to press the back. And here's my little Victorian stocking. Okay, so we have finished the stocking. I think it turned out pretty. I love the fabric. It's going to look very pretty in my living room, which you will see in my Christmas house tour. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. It was actually harder to film it than it was to make the stocking. So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.